Yeah! YouTube vinyl community, Chuck Berry fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and today we are here to talk about one of Chuck Berry's albums called New Juke Box Hits, released in March of 1961. Now, I wanted to jump on here because, fortunately and sadly, Chuck Berry died over the weekend. He was 90 years old. He had a really long life, and he was the reason, or one of the reasons, why rock and roll music exists. If it wasn't for him and a few other guys, we wouldn't have the music that we love and appreciate today, in any form. You know, he played his own instrument, he wrote his own songs, he toured, he drove his own car, he wanted to get paid in cash only. I mean, this guy was rock and roll, through and through. He punched Keith Richards in the face one time. It's almost like losing a myth at this point because he was alive for so long. It's 90 years is a long bloody time, and it's kind of weird because I didn't grow up in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, or most of the 80s, but you know, Chuck Berry's music was very instrumental in my upbringing and my love of music because all the bands I loved were doing his songs, like the Beatles and the Stones and the Beach Boys. You know, I got introduced to a lot of that through them. But I also knew of his own songs from on the radio, like Johnny B. Good or Roll Over Beethoven. Songs that are just in the DNA at this point of every guitar player that's ever picked up the instrument and thought, I can make that sound. Let's see what can happen. You know, his style and his phrasing and his timing and the way he sung combined with the shuffle of his music was very original, and you just know it's him when he comes on. I mean, every Christmas when Run Run Rudolph comes on, you know that's Chuck Berry. He's just got that sound, a very unique sound, and that's what makes rock and roll so important, is that the people who are unique are the people who stand out, and his music certainly did that. So this is an album called New Juke Box Hits, and this is a 1984 Chess Records reissue. My whole life, I have never been able to come across Chuck's albums, either because they're just too old and they've been tossed at this point, or because they're in terrible shape, or because they're really hard to find. Either way, I've never been able to find too much of his albums beyond stuff from the early 70s, like the London Sessions and all that stuff. But this was his fifth album for Chess Records, and at this time, it was his last for about a year and a half as he went to jail for bringing an underage girl across state lines. So he kind of disappeared for a while, and during this time, you know, he was kind of in and out in trouble with the law because of that, because of getting arrested with the girl, and subsequently his popularity was on the down. It was waning. So he wasn't selling as much as he had been in the 50s, where he was on top of the world. And so at this point, this album really doesn't have a whole lot of hits on it for being called New Juke Box Hits. Beyond the first song, I'm Talking About You, which the Stones did a fantastic version of a couple albums later. And I think the Beatles may have done it on one of their BBC albums, I think. So yeah, let's get into it. This is a really, it's a really interesting album because while it doesn't have those Johnny B. Goods or Roll Over Beethovens or Too Much Monkey Business or Brown Eyed Handsome Man's, like, it's still an interesting listen to hear someone who's going through so much trouble with the law at this point is to try to make happy sounding music, I guess. So like I said, the first song, Talking About You, was actually a single on this album, and like I said, the Beatles and the Stones did it, and it's a great song. It's a great way to open the album. It showcases his instantly recognizable smooth vocals on top of that guitar power that he had, his phrasing and timing. He's just a very distinct style of delivering music, and it's very cool to listen to, just the way he does his solos. And if you've ever tried to play like him, it's hard to keep up. He's got a very odd style of playing, but because of that, it's his own style, but he makes it sound so easy. So Talk About You, great opener. Diploma for Two, there's a lot of background horns on this song, and it's got that classic School Days vibe that he sung about a couple of times. And it's kind of like a casual, upbeat dance tempo, and you know, his solo again pops in and reminds the listener that, yep, that's Chuck doing his thing. 13 Question Method is the next song on this album, and it's kind of like a slight salsa rhythm, which is kind of interesting, and it's like a countdown list song. So there's 13 reasons that he gives for kind of dating somebody. Lots of great percussion in this song, and it kind of, while it has that salsa vibe, it also kind of sounds like Never Can Tell a little bit. Away From You is this really great piano blues track with a fantastic vocal group behind him. I wish I knew more about who the group was that did the vocals on the behind him. I can't talk. The background vocals. Hey, that's the word I was looking for. And then right at the end, he throws in this like really confused sounding solo, which kind of breaks the piano rhythm and offers a whole different layer to the song, which is really interesting to listen to. Don't You Lie to Me is the next song. It's a song about by Tampa Red, who is a blues guy. And this track really lets Chuck's smooth voice kind of hit a more rocking edge. And I say that loosely. It's not like he's like growling or something, but there's a little bit more of a gravel in his voice. And his guitar on this one is very like angular and soulful, really passionately played. The Way It Was Before is the last song on side 1, and that's a very like 50s malt shop vibe of a song. I get the impression of like someone watching their old sweetheart talking to a new person and imagining what it used to be like before they just completely screwed it all up. Remembering the old times and how good they were. So that's a pretty cool song. Side 2 opens with Little Star. And I really enjoyed that song. That's actually one of my favorites on this album, actually. It kind of opens with this talking, singing thing, like as an introduction, and then it goes into this like really reflective ballad, and again with excellent background vocals and his really simple, jangly guitar solo that he does gets thrown in to kind of give it a blues feel. So it kind of has like a piano blues, but then it becomes like a rock blues. So it's an interesting mix. Route 66, it's his classic take on Route 66. It's one of those things where it's just cool to hear him do it his way, hear his voice on it. It just works really well. Sweet 16, it's a really like slow burn blues. It's got that late night club feel, unresolved emotions left to a guitar. Run Around, this song kind of like blows you out of the water. Opens with these really loud pulsing guitar riffs and a touch of a slide guitar sound. I'm not sure if it's actually a slide guitar, but it sounds like a little bit of one is snuck in there. Kind of a country influenced rocker on this one, which is very possible because he was definitely influenced by a lot of country music. So kind of like a country blues fusion blueprint that is also kind of the staple for like any band who's ever wanted to make rock music. Like that's the song you would go to learn to set up your 4-piece in the basement and figure out how to make rock and roll. Like this is one of those songs you can do it with. Stop and Listen has a I Put a Spell on You vibe, which I really like. It's kind of eerie and a little sad and kind of creepy. And Chuck's voice shows a real tenderness that lends well to his quiet guitar. And then it kind of ends suddenly, which is a really interesting ending. And Rip It Up, I mean, the last song on the album, that's his classic take on the classic Little Richard song. It's a fantastic rock and roll hellfire of an ending to just remind you that Chuck Berry is one of the kings of the rock and roll guitar. And that's it. That's the last song on the album. But I really enjoy this album. I've had this for a long time, and it's one of those things I pull out every once in a while and kind of dig into again because it's nice to hear songs that aren't his hits. You kind of hear his hits all the time, but hearing something like this kind of showcases what else he was capable of. And songs like Stop and Listen or Run Around or Little Star, The Way It Was Before, it's nice to hear him do something a little different. So yeah, it's definitely an album I would highly consider checking out. If you've never heard a Chuck Berry album before, I mean, I probably wouldn't start with this one. I'd probably start with something earlier with more of his hits on it, kind of get your feet wet. But you can't go wrong with this one. I give this one probably a 7 or an 8 out of 10. Really good album, and I like the album cover. I think it's just really cool. That beautiful jukebox sitting there. He's got this cool leopard print vest on, which is really rad. So yeah, I wanted to jump on and make this video and say thank you, Chuck Berry, for all the music that you gave. And if it wasn't for you, we probably wouldn't have the Beatles or the Stones or the Beach Boys or a ton of other music. So, a very big tip of my imaginary hat to you, sir. And he's gone off and joined the rest of the greats now at this point to that great gig in the sky. That as sad as it is for us on Earth, it's only getting brighter up there. So, thank you, Chuck, for all the music, and thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Album Reviews with me, Giggens, and this has been Chuck Berry, new Juke Box Hits, released in March 1961 on Chess Records. Thank you so much for watching, guys. See you in the next video.